Someone lying in bed all day makes the whole house feel heavy and gloomy. It's such a hassle because he can't even take care of himself. I can't help but wonder how long this will go on, or if he plans to live like this forever. Every time I step out of the room, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law repeat their familiar refrain. Sophie, what's the point of having a husband if he's useless and just takes up space? Even my father-in-law nods in agreement. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. I'm Ethan Carter, 34 years old, a programmer in Seattle, Washington, married to Sophie Miller for 5 years. My father passed away from illness when I was in high school, and my mother died not long after I got married. Since I was a kid, I've been passionate about programming, dreaming of creating an online learning app that would change how people access knowledge. Before I worked for a big tech company, made good money, and my wife's family in Bellevue, a Seattle suburb, really respected me. My mother-in-law, Margaret, a retired bank employee, used to praise me as someone with a future. My father-in-law, Robert, a former factory manager, would pat my shoulder and call me reliable. My sister-in-law, Claire, an arrogant marketing employee though boastful, didn't cause trouble. But a car accident destroyed everything. I was driving home when a truck hit me. When I woke up in the hospital, the doctor said I was paralyzed from the waist down. My legs, which used to carry me on morning runs, were now useless. I was confined to bed, dependent on others. At first, my wife's family took care of me. Sophie stayed by my side, holding my hand through the painful days. Margaret brought soup, and Robert helped with physical therapy. But their kindness didn't last. Just a few months later, they saw me as a burden. Margaret complained that I made the house stifling, saying I took up space. Robert shook his head, saying I wasn't man enough. Claire bluntly called me a parasite at dinner, right in front of Sophie. Sophie, the woman I love, now just stays silent, not defending me when her mother and sister insult me, only lowering her head, avoiding my gaze. The house in Bellevue has no ramps, narrow hallways, and I'm trapped in bed, hearing harsh words every day. Sophie, what's the point of a husband if he's useless and takes up space? Margaret repeats, and Robert nods. Claire is worse, mocking me in front of her friends. He just lies there. A real freeloader. It hurts, not just physically, but because my pride is crushed. I was once someone they admired. Now they see me as worthless. But they don't know my secret. I never stopped working. From my laptop in bed, I quietly developed an online learning app, something I started before the accident. I work at night, coding through back pain. My app has attracted thousands of users, bringing in tens of thousands of dollars a month. I used that money to hire Daniel Hayes, a former soldier, to help me bathe and move around. I also secretly pay the electricity and water bills for my wife's family, but they have no idea. To them, I'm just a bedridden man living off their pity. Every time Claire calls me a parasite, or Margaret says I disgrace the family, I grit my teeth and endure. Not because I'm weak, but because I know my worth. It hurts, not just because of my immobile body, but because those words stab at my pride. Before I was someone they admired. I paid for electricity, water, even fixed the roof when it leaked. Now, just because my legs don't work, I'm useless in their eyes. Sophie, my wife, was the only one who gave me hope. At first, she stayed by my side, brought me water, read books to distract me. But the pressure from her family changed her. She started avoiding my gaze, answering curtly when I tried to talk. When Margaret or Claire insulted me, Sophie just lowered her head, silent. I once thought our love was strong enough to overcome anything, but now I'm not so sure. The house in Bellevue wasn't built for someone like me. Narrow hallways, small doors, no wheelchair ramps. I suggested to Robert that he install a temporary ramp, but he brushed it off, a waste of money. You're going to stay in bed forever. Why need a ramp? I was trapped in a small room, only leaving the bed when Sophie or Daniel, my helper, assisted me onto the wheelchair. Each time I saw their pitying looks, not empathy, but contempt. Margaret once said outright, "If you can't take care of yourself, don't burden others." Claire was worse, sneering that I just lie there, making the house cramped. I tried to offer suggestions to the family, like ways to save on electricity or fix a leaking pipe, but they ignored me. Once I told Margaret I could pay for house repairs, using income from the online learning app I was developing. She scoffed. "Money from where? You're dreaming in that bed." I stayed silent, not wanting to reveal my secret. I was afraid if they knew I was earning tens of thousands a month, they'd try to exploit me. Sophie didn't believe me either. Once I tried to tell her about my project, but she cut me off. "Ethan, stop talking about pipe dreams. You know our situation." Her words were like a knife, making me realize she'd been convinced by her family that I was useless. I was hurt, but didn't let myself drown in sorrow. Every night, when the house slept, I opened my laptop, kept coding. My app was gaining traction, users were growing fast, and investors started reaching out. I quietly paid the family's bills, though they thought it was Robert's money. Daniel, my helper, was a rare light in those dark days. He didn't just help me bathe or move, he listened. Once when Claire called me a parasite in front of him, Daniel retorted, "You should look at yourself before judging others." Claire was furious but didn't dare argue, as Daniel was the only one who stood up to her. Despite the insults, I tried to keep the peace. I didn't want Sophie caught between me and her family. But every day, my patience was tested. Margaret started demanding I contribute to the house, though I was paying more than they knew. Robert hinted that Sophie deserved a better husband. Claire, with her venomous smile, told me, "You should leave, Ethan. You're just making everyone miserable here." I clenched my teeth, telling myself to stay patient. I knew my worth, and I was building a future they couldn't imagine. Though my wife's family despised me, I didn't let myself sink into despair. I knew my worth, and from my laptop in bed, I quietly built my future. My work was developing an online learning app, a project I started before the accident. It lets users learn skills from programming to cooking through short, accessible courses. I worked at night, when everyone in Bellevue was asleep, coding through persistent back pain. Each line of code was a step forward. Each email from a user was motivation. My app had attracted tens of thousands of users, bringing in tens of thousands of dollars a month. I kept this secret, not out of fear, but because I knew my wife's family would try to exploit me if they found out. The money I earned allowed me to hire Daniel Hayes, a 50-year-old former soldier, as my helper. Daniel didn't just assist with bathing or moving. He became a close friend. He was tall with a deep voice, but his eyes were always warm. The first time we met, he looked at me and said, "You're not a burden, Ethan. You're a warrior." Those words were like a flame, warming me in those dark days. Daniel came to the house a few times a week, helped me onto the wheelchair, took me to the backyard for fresh air. He never showed pity, only treated me like a normal person. That made me feel I was still Ethan Carter, not the freeloader my wife's family called me. But my wife's family didn't see it that way. They mocked me for hiring Daniel, calling it ridiculous, extravagant. Once, while Daniel was helping me change, Margaret walked in, frowning. "Where'd you get the money to hire someone like this?" Leeching off Sophie again. I stayed silent, not wanting to explain. Claire was worse. She sneered in front of Daniel. "A bedridden guy hiring a helper? Where's the money from?" "Stealing." Daniel replied, calm but sharp. "You should ask how much you're worth before talking about others." Claire was livid, but didn't dare argue. Sophie, my wife, just stood there, saying nothing. Her silence hurt more than the insults. I kept my income a secret, because I didn't want my wife's family to know. I was quietly paying the electricity, water, internet, even plumbing repairs for the Bellevue house. They thought it was Robert, my father-in-law, and I let them keep thinking that. Once I tried telling Sophie about my project, hoping she'd be proud. I told her the app was getting investor attention, that I'd received an email from a big company wanting to buy it for millions. She cut me off, voice tired. "Ethan, stop talking about pipe dreams. You know how tough things are." Her words were a knife. I realized she no longer believed in me, no longer saw me as the man she once loved. Though hurt, I didn't give up. Every night, I opened my laptop, checked user stats, answered partner emails. An investor from San Francisco offered to meet via Zoom to discuss buying the app. I declined in-person meetings, citing health, but really, I didn't want them to see me in a wheelchair. I feared pitying looks, though I knew I shouldn't. Daniel helped me overcome that insecurity. Once, when I shared my fear of being judged, he said, "Ethan, your talent is in your mind, not your legs. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." His words were a push, making me more determined. Daniel wasn't just a helper, he was the only friend I could trust. He shared stories of his military days, how he overcame hardships with grit. "Life's not fair, but you choose how to face it," he said. I started telling him about my app, my dream of making it a global education platform. Daniel listened, nodded, sometimes offered tips on time management. He didn't know much about tech, but his sincerity made me feel understood. My wife's family kept seeing me as a burden. Margaret demanded I pay for the house, though I was covering more than they knew. Robert grumbled that Sophie deserved a healthy husband. Claire never missed a chance to mock, calling me useless whenever guests came. I endured, not because I was weak, but because I was waiting for the right moment. I knew my app was nearing a major milestone, and then I'd show them they were wrong. My endurance was pushed to the limit when Claire returned after a scandalous divorce. She'd bragged about her lavish life, but now, with massive debts from shopping and failed investments, Claire came back like a storm, disrupting everything. Her presence made the already stifling house even more tense. She didn't take long to target me, as if I were the cause of her troubles. One evening at dinner, she looked at me, smirking. "This house is cursed, full of useless people like you, Ethan." Her words were a knife, but I clenched my teeth, staying silent. Margaret quickly joined in. She put down her chopsticks, sighed. "Claire's right. You lie there all day, making the house gloomier. Ethan, don't you think you're disgracing the family?" Robert, my father-in-law, said nothing, just nodded in agreement. Sophie, my wife, lowered her head, not defending me, as always. Her silence broke my heart. I'd hoped Sophie would stand by me, but now, she seemed fully convinced by her family that I was a burden. I looked around the dinner table, realizing I had no place in this family. Claire didn't stop. She kept mocking me in front of others, especially when guests visited. Once her friends came over, and she pointed to my room, laughing. "That's my brother-in-law, lying in bed all day. Total parasite." Her friends laughed, and I heard them whispering in the living room. I gripped my hands, suppressing my anger. Daniel, my helper, happened to be there, looking at me with sympathetic eyes. He whispered, "Don't let them hurt you, Ethan. They're not worth it." But his comfort only deepened my pain, reminding me that the only person who cared wasn't family. Conflict escalated when Margaret started openly demanding I contribute to the house. One morning, she knocked on my door, saying coldly, "Ethan, you've been here for free too long. If you can't contribute, find somewhere else." I was stunned. I'd been quietly paying for electricity, water, internet, even the furnace repair for the whole house, but no one knew. I wanted to tell the truth, but held back. I feared if I revealed my income from the online learning app, they'd try to mooch or cause trouble. Instead, I said, "I'll try, Margaret." She scoffed. "Try? What can you do lying there?" I decided to talk to Sophie, hoping she'd understand. One evening, when it was just us in the room, I held her hand, saying, "Sophie, I know you're under pressure from your family, but their words hurt me deeply. Can you ask them to stop?" Sophie pulled her hand away, sighing. "Ethan, you're too sensitive. They say that because you can't do anything. You have to understand." Her words were a dagger to my heart. I looked into her eyes, searching for a trace of the wife who loved me, but saw only distance. "I'm not just lying here, Sophie. I'm working," I said. My voice trembling. She cut me off. "Working? In bed? Stop talking nonsense, Ethan." I fell silent, realizing she no longer believed in me. That hurt spurred me to act. I started recording my wife's family's insults, planning to use them as evidence if needed. Whenever Claire called me a parasite, or Margaret demanded I leave, I turned on my phone, saving every word. I didn't want to sue, but I needed to protect myself. Daniel was the only one who knew about this plan. Once, when I shared about the recordings, he nodded. "You're doing the right thing, Ethan. They don't respect you, but you have to respect yourself." His words gave me strength. The conflict peaked at a family party in Bellevue. Margaret threw a birthday party for Robert, inviting relatives and friends. Daniel wheeled me to the living room, but Claire immediately mocked. "Oh look, the parasite crawled out of his cave." Some guests laughed, and Margaret added, "Ethan, you should stay in your room. Don't ruin everyone's mood." Sophie stood there, silent. I felt stripped bare before the crowd. I wanted to scream that I was paying for this very party, but I held back. Instead, I wheeled back to my room, opened my laptop, and kept working. My app had just hit 100,000 users, and an investor emailed offering to buy it for $5 million. That was the only light in that dark day. I clenched my teeth, telling myself to be patient. I knew I was building an empire from my bed, and one day, my wife's family would see they were wrong. But every insult, every scornful look, made me wonder how much longer could I endure. Sophie, the woman I loved, now sided with her family. Claire, with her venomous smile, seemed determined to drive me out. Margaret and Robert just wanted me gone. I gripped my phone with the recordings, vowing I wouldn't break. One evening, as I worked on my laptop in the small room, Sophie walked in, her eyes cold. She sat on the edge of the bed, not looking at me, and said, "Ethan, we should get a divorce." I was stunned, as if the ground had collapsed beneath me. "Why, Sophie?" I asked, my voice trembling. She sighed, repeating the words her mother and sister had said so many times. "You're a burden, Ethan. You can't do anything. Just lie there. I need a husband. Healthier, more suitable. She paused, then continued. I can't live like this forever. You have to understand. Her words were a knife through my heart. I looked at her, searching for a trace of the wife who held my hand through painful days, but saw only distance. Sophie, I'm not just lying here, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm working, making money, even paying for this family. She scoffed, her tone mocking. Working. In bed? Ethan, stop talking nonsense. You think I'd believe that? I wanted to shout that I was earning tens of thousands a month, that my online learning app was about to be sold for millions, but I held back. I realized Sophie was no longer someone I could trust. She had chosen her family over me. I hurt, but I didn't beg. I looked at her and said, Fine, Sophie. If you want a divorce, I'll agree. She seemed surprised, as if she hadn't expected me to accept so easily. Are you sure? She asked. I nodded, my voice cold. Absolutely. You want another husband? Go find one. Sophie said nothing more, just stood up and left the room. When the door closed, I felt like my world crumbled. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, recalling our wedding day when Sophie smiled and promised to stay by my side forever. Now that promise was just a memory. I wondered, was I wrong for not revealing the truth about my work sooner? But deep down, I knew even if Sophie had known, she wouldn't have changed. I didn't let myself drown in sorrow. The next morning, I called Daniel Hayes, my helper and only friend. Daniel, I need you to help me find a new apartment, I said. I'm leaving this place. Daniel was quiet for a moment, then asked, You okay, Ethan? I gave a sad smile. No, but I will be. He nodded, not pressing further, only saying, I'll find the best place for you. Somewhere you deserve. Daniel's sincerity moved me. He wasn't just a helper. He was the only one who believed in me in this house full of contempt. I contacted Laura Bennett, a lawyer Daniel recommended. Laura was sharp, specializing in divorces. Over the phone, I told her about the situation, the insults from my wife's family, and the recordings I'd kept. You've got strong evidence, Ethan, Laura said. If needed, we can sue for emotional distress. But for now, let's focus on the divorce. I agreed. I didn't want to fight over assets, just to leave with what was mine. Laura prepared the divorce papers, ensuring my app income stayed secret. I didn't want my wife's family to know how much I was earning, not out of fear, but because I didn't want them to have a chance to exploit me. Daniel quickly found a wheelchair-accessible apartment in Capitol Hill, Seattle, a modern and vibrant area. He sent me pictures. The apartment had ramps, wide hallways, and a low kitchen counter, so I could cook. This is where you can start over, Daniel said. I nodded, a flicker of hope in my heart. I began imagining a new life, where I wouldn't be called a parasite. But before leaving, I had to face my wife's family one last time. A week later, Laura sent the divorce papers to the house. I called Sophie into the room, handed her the document. Sign it, I said. Sophie looked at me, a hint of hesitation in her eyes. Ethan, you don't hate me, do you? She asked. I shook my head. No, Sophie. I just want us both to be free. She signed the papers, saying nothing more. Margaret, Robert, and Claire weren't there, but I knew they'd be pleased. They'd wanted me gone for a long time. I asked Daniel to pack my things, just a few suitcases of clothes, my laptop, and small mementos. When I left the Bellevue house, I didn't look back. In my wheelchair, Daniel pushed me to the car, and we drove to Capitol Hill. At the new apartment, I felt a sense of freedom, however slight. The apartment was bright, with large windows overlooking the city. Daniel helped me settle in, then sat down, looking at me. You did it, Ethan. This is a new beginning. I smiled, though my heart was still heavy. I opened my laptop, checked my email. An investor had just offered to buy my app for $5 million. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath. I knew I'd made the right choice to leave. But in that quiet moment, I couldn't stop thinking about Sophie, about the days we were happy. Daniel Hayes wasn't just a helper. He was the friend who was there when I faltered. The only one who didn't turn away. He came a few times a week, helping me bathe, buy groceries, sometimes staying to drink coffee and talk about life. Daniel wasn't just a helper. He became my business partner. As my online learning app grew exponentially, I realized I needed someone to manage finances and communicate with partners. Daniel, with his military experience and discipline, agreed to take on the role. I'm not tech savvy, but I know how to keep things in order, he said, smiling. I entrusted him with monitoring emails, scheduling Zoom meetings, and handling contracts. Daniel's support let me focus on coding, taking the app to new heights. My work exploded. The online learning app reached over 200,000 users, and a major tech company in San Francisco offered to buy it for $5 million. I signed the deal but didn't stop there. With that money, I founded a small startup in Seattle, focusing on online education. Tech publications started writing about me, calling me the tech hero from a hospital bed. A TechCrunch article surprised me. They interviewed me via Zoom, and when I shared my journey overcoming the accident, they wrote that I was a symbol of grit. I read the article, smiled, but my heart remained heavy. This success was meant to be shared with Sophie, but she chose to walk away. I began building new relationships. Rachel Lee, a tech journalist, reached out to write a deeper story about my company. Rachel was young, smart, with a warm smile. Over a few Zoom chats, she showed interest in me, beyond just work. Once she said, "Ethan, you're truly inspiring. Not many could do what you did." I appreciated it, but wasn't ready to open my heart. The wound from Sophie lingered, and I wanted to focus on myself. Beyond Rachel, I connected with other programmers through online forums. They didn't know I was in a wheelchair, only that I created a groundbreaking app. Those conversations made me feel part of a community, no longer alone, like in Bellevue. My wife's family started reaching out. A week after I moved, Margaret called, her voice unnervingly sweet. "Ethan, we're worried about you. You okay on your own?" I knew she wasn't sincere. The TechCrunch article must have reached them, and they smelled money. I politely declined. "I'm fine, Margaret. Don't worry." Then came a text from Claire, dripping with pretense. "Brother-in-law, sorry about before. You good?" I didn't reply. Sophie sent an email, just a few lines. "Ethan, I hope you're okay." "I'm sorry." I read it but didn't respond. Their apologies couldn't erase the years they called me a parasite. I'd given them chances, but they chose to insult me. Now I wanted nothing to do with them. Life in Capitol Hill wasn't easy. Though the apartment was wheelchair-friendly, I had to learn to be independent. I cooked simple meals, like pasta or fried eggs, feeling like I was reclaiming part of my old self. Daniel taught me how to adjust my wheelchair for smoother movement. Once he took me to a park near Capitol Hill, where I breathed fresh air and watched kids play. "See, Ethan," Daniel said, "life still has plenty of good things." I nodded, feeling a spark of hope. I started joining online tech events, sharing experiences with young programmers. Each small step was a victory, proving I wasn't just the bedridden guy my wife's family claimed. My success grew. The startup received new investments, and I hired a small team to develop app features. I still worked from my apartment, but now I no longer felt trapped. My laptop was a window to a world where I was respected for my talent, not my legs. Daniel, as my manager, kept everything organized. He laughed. "Ethan, you're building an empire here." I smiled, but there was still an emptiness inside. I missed Sophie, not the current her, but the girl who loved me unconditionally. But I knew I couldn't go back. I had to move forward, for myself. Life in Capitol Hill, Seattle, gave me the freedom and confidence I'd lost in Bellevue. My online learning app sold for $5 million. My startup thrived, and I became a familiar face in tech publications. But just when I thought I'd cut ties with the past, my wife's family tried to come back. They didn't reach out because they cared, but because they learned of my success through articles. Their hypocrisy only strengthened my resolve to protect my new life. First came a call from Margaret, my mother-in-law. Her voice was strangely sweet. "Ethan, we're so worried about you. Are you managing alone?" I saw through her intentions. The TechCrunch article had reached Bellevue, and they smelled money. "I'm fine, Margaret," I replied coldly. "Thanks, but I don't need concern." She pressed on. "We were wrong to say those harsh things. Come back to live with the family. We'll take care of you." I smirked inwardly. Take care? They called me a parasite and demanded I leave. Now they wanted me back just for money. I refused. "No, Margaret. I'm better off alone," she stammered, then hung up. Then came Claire, my sister-in-law. She sent a text, full of pretense. "Brother-in-law, sorry about before. You okay? Can we meet?" I didn't respond. Claire had laughed at me in front of everyone, called me useless. Her apology was just a ploy to get money. But the peak was when Claire showed up at my Capitol Hill apartment, unannounced. I was working when the doorbell rang. Daniel Hayes, my friend and manager, opened the door. Claire walked in, Her smile forced Ethan. I came to visit. Heard you're a big success. I'm so proud. I looked at her, my voice calm but sharp. What do you want, Claire? She fumbled, then said, we're struggling, Ethan. Can you help the family a bit? You're rich now, after all. I shook my head, holding back anger. Help the family. When I needed you, you called me a parasite. Now I'm what? A bank? Claire flushed, her voice shaky. Don't be petty, Ethan. We were wrong, but can't you help a little? Daniel, standing nearby, cut in. You should leave, Claire. What? Ethan doesn't owe you anything. Claire, furious, pointed at me. You think you're so great? It's just luck. I smiled. Luck or not, I don't need your judgment. Get out, Claire. Daniel opened the door, and she left, not before snapping. You'll regret this. Sophie was the last to reach out. She sent an email, just a few lines. Ethan, I'm sorry for everything. I hope you're happy. I read it but didn't reply. Her apology came too late. She chose her family over me, and I couldn't forgive her silence when I was insulted. Their apologies couldn't erase the scars they left. I decided to cut them off completely. I contacted Laura Bennett, my lawyer, to handle the issue. I sent her the recordings of my wife's family's insults. Margaret demanding I leave. Claire calling me a parasite. Robert saying I wasn't man enough. Laura listened, then said, Ethan, this is strong evidence. We can sue for emotional distress. They need to be held accountable. I agreed. I didn't want money, just justice. Laura prepared the case, sending legal notices to my wife's family. I knew they'd panic, but I didn't care if they pushed me to this point. Meanwhile, I heard about my wife's family's situation through an acquaintance. They were facing severe financial trouble. Sophie lost her job when her company went bankrupt, unable to find new work. Claire, with massive debts from failed investments and lavish living, had her assets seized and moved back with her parents. Margaret and Robert spent all their savings on risky stocks, now scraping by. The Bellevue house was foreclosed, and they risked losing it. I didn't rejoice at their hardship, but I felt no pity. They chose to treat me like trash, and now they faced the consequences. My startup kept growing, and I was preparing to launch a new app feature. Daniel managed everything, from meeting schedules to finances. Once, he said, Ethan, you've gone further than I ever imagined. I'm proud of you. I smiled, grateful for his support. I knew I was right to leave Bellevue. My wife's family could live with their mistakes, but I wouldn't let the past drag me back. I wasn't just a programmer. I became a symbol of grit, invited to speak at online tech conferences. Articles called me a hero who overcame adversity. But to me, the greatest success was rediscovering myself. I was no longer the parasite. My wife's family labeled me. I was Ethan Carter, a man who proved worth isn't in legs but in mind and will. I decided to use my success to help others. I donated part of my profits to a Seattle organization supporting people with disabilities, funding wheelchairs, and job training programs. Once I visited a center, meeting people struggling like I had. I shared my story, urging them not to give up. A young man, also paralyzed from an accident, held my hand, saying, "Thank you, Ethan. You give me hope." That moment was worth more than any $1 million deal. I realized I wasn't just living for myself, but to inspire others. I started writing a book about my journey from hospital bed to success. I wrote at night, when the city was quiet, pouring out emotions I'd suppressed. The book wasn't just my story. It was a reminder that everyone has value, no matter what society says. Daniel Hayes, my friend and manager, read the first draft. He laughed. "Ethan, this will change lives." I hoped he was right. I wanted those who'd been belittled, like me, to know they could rise. Meanwhile, my wife's family kept paying for their actions. Through an acquaintance, I learned they'd fallen into ruin. Sophie was still jobless, taking odd jobs to get by. Claire, with huge debts, had her assets seized and moved back with her parents. Margaret and Robert lost the Bellevue house, unable to pay the mortgage, now renting a small apartment in the suburbs. My lawsuit, with the insult recordings, forced them to pay compensation for emotional distress. They stopped contacting me, likely out of shame or knowing I wouldn't forgive. I didn't take joy in their suffering, but I felt no regret. They chose to treat me like garbage, and now they faced the consequences. One evening, I was invited to a community event at Gasworks Park, Seattle. In my wheelchair, next to Daniel, I received an award for supporting people with disabilities. Standing before the crowd, I said, "I was once called useless, but I learned our worth isn't in what others think. It's in our will and talent." The crowd applauded, and my heart felt light. Rachel Lee, the journalist who interviewed me, was there. Afterward, she invited me for coffee, and this time, I agreed. I wasn't ready for love, but I was opening up to good things. Looking back, I have no regrets. The insults from my wife's family, Sophie's silence, all forged me into someone stronger. I know my worth doesn't depend on legs or others' approval. From a hospital bed, I built an empire, not just with talent, but with unwavering will. I am Ethan Carter, and my story proves that, no matter how harsh life is, we can always rewrite our own ending. My story reflects the real challenges in today's American society, where biases about ability and gender roles can overshadow personal worth. Ethan, a Seattle programmer, paralyzed after a car crash, was called a parasite by his wife's family. Margaret, Robert, Claire, and Sophie, for not fitting the breadwinning man stereotype. They mocked him in their Bellevue home, deeming him useless in bed. Yet, Ethan secretly built an online learning app, earning millions, and moved to Capitol Hill, creating an independent life. He overcame their scorn through talent, support from Daniel, his helper and friend, and resolve not to let contempt define him. His wife's family, conversely, fell into financial ruin due to selfish choices, losing their home and dignity. Ethan, by donating to the disabled at Gasworks Park and writing an inspiring book, showed the power of will and kindness. The lesson in American culture, where success pressure and biases, like disability or gender roles, can make you feel worthless. Trust your abilities, like Ethan did. Coding through pain. Don't let insults, like Claire, shake your confidence. Seek genuine support, like Daniel, to push through. Most importantly, turn adversity into opportunity, like Ethan's $1 million app from bed, and share that success, like his community donations. Persevere, find your community, and live kindly. That's how to affirm your worth in today's America. Don't forget to subscribe to catch inspiring stories of overcoming adversity, like Ethan Carter's. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video with more valuable lessons.